when we begin to teach people how to break that addiction and slow the body back down again, and their brain is moving from beta down the steps, and they're going inward, that alpha pattern then is when you consolidate new circuits in your brain. So like I know when I'm lecturing that people are getting information because I'll develop a concept or an idea, and as I develop the concept or an idea, they'll go from the outer world listening to me to the inner world of actually consolidating the knowledge. They'll pause and the brain will move into alpha. When it happens, the brain stores it in its circuitry. So when we learn, we move into alpha. So if you're in high beta, you never, ever get any new information in there. So in alpha, the imaginary world, the inner world becomes more real. And what we noticed on our scans is that the beta patterns tend to slow down, and we start to get these really broad, healthy alpha patterns. And the person now is creating coherent, orderly, rhythmic patterns, and different compartments of the brain are shaking hands. Different areas of the brain, the left side's talking to the right side, the front is talking to the back. All of a sudden we're getting this psychic union going on, and different neighborhoods are saying, she's out of the way. Every time I leave my body, the first thing my body always says is, thank God he's out of the way. And I see my body laughing while I'm standing there because it's relieved that the operators had a chance to heal, So that's exactly what happens, is that the moment that we're out of the way, the moment we're not our body, the no longer we're not our identity, the no longer we're not the environment or putting our awareness on the external world, the brain tends to get more orderly and coherent. And different compartments of the brain begin to say, he's selfless, he's not a self any longer, and so there's a coherence and orderliness, and we start getting this synchronization that takes place in the brain. And what syncs together links together. And when you're stressed and insecure and emotional, that fragmented personality keeps a person powerless, because it's like having a multiple personality disorder, but experiencing all the personalities at the same time. We've all been there. Meditation allows that kind of orderliness. And when the front starts talking to the back and the sides start talking to the side, you start feeling more like yourself than you felt in a long time. And all of a sudden, all the things that you were stressing about no longer have any value any longer, because you've taken your attention off them, and the body settles down. Now that coherent and orderly signal from the brain sends a very coherent and orderly message down the central nervous system, which controls and coordinates all other systems. And all of a sudden the immune system says, wow, that's a great rhythm. All of a sudden there's a group of guys playing really great drums, and the orchestra, the symphony now is playing in unison, and the cell are getting a very organized symphonic message. And so the immune system starts making some really healthy white blood cells. The digestive system starts working its timing better, and all of a sudden the heart is starting in harmonics with the brain, and you start experiencing well-being. And so the moment you start experiencing well-being, you go from tissue breakdown, catabolism, degeneration, into a state of regeneration, anabolism, tissue repair. Even the brain cells start growing. Everything starts growing. Cortical thickness starts to happen. Cortisol levels drop. Stress genes are dysregulated and down. They're shut off. They're dampered down. And all of a sudden, the body starts expressing a greater level of health. And now all of a sudden, you go from particle to wave. And the energy starts to move into the heart, and all of a sudden we start seeing the chakra centers lining up, and the person all of a sudden now starts having energy from the body as the mind, because that's where all of it's stored. The body's freed from the chains of the past. And the moment that happens, the side effect is called joy, and that energy starts moving from the hormonal centers. In other words, if you're no longer a sexual identity, you're no longer digesting food, and you're no longer stressing and feeling out of balance, all those energy centers all of a sudden, that energy has to go somewhere. So it starts to move into the heart. You start to fall in love in the moment. You want the moment to last. Your body is feeling enriched, and all of a sudden the heart starts to open, and the energy starts moving back to the brain, and it's moving out of the body, and you're generating a bigger field, and all of a sudden you'll be able to focus on possibility because you're taking your attention off the particle, and now you're focusing on the 99% of possibility that the atom is made of, and you're beginning to select new ideas, new paradigms, new creative states. And so before brain starts to work in constructing new archetypes and new patterns, and you see the person moving into a creative state, and all of a sudden they're a different state of expression in their brain. I'm speaking from my present state of ignorance, of course, but we have two aspects of our consciousness. We have our subjective consciousness. That's the free-willed entity called you and me that has a soul that's on a journey back to source, that gets to like and dislike, gets to be happy, gets to be sad, gets to choose or not choose. It's a free-willed being. That is our subjective consciousness. That's this field around us that exists beyond space and time. It can be measured, but it's an electromagnetic field. Then there is that objective consciousness that exists beyond space and time, that's observing all of this into reality. And that objective consciousness is very sensitive to how we think and feel. Thoughts are electric and feelings are magnetic. And how you think and how you feel, called a state of being, broadcasts an electromagnetic signature that influences every single atom in your life. So if you're walking around every day frustrated and suffering, thinking and feeling that way, what you're saying to that objective consciousness as a subjective creator, okay, divine intelligence, giver of life, who endorses who I'm being, I'm expressing a certain level of suffering today. So now I'm creating suffering in my life, but bringing it in a way that I least expect, that surprises me and leaves no doubt that it's come from you so I can suffer more. So that's karma. Well, karma happens every day, and because we're thinking and feeling in the same way, we keep creating the same external environment. We create that same external environment. We react in the same way of thinking and feeling. That same thinking and feeling then reinforces that same environment, and there's a tango between the outer world and the inner world, and that's called karma. Break the addiction to the emotion. Change your habituations of thought and actions. Change your feelings that you've memorized, and all of a sudden there is no karma. See, we're not punished for our sins, we're punished by our sins. So then the subjective consciousness, when it marries with or unifies with that objective consciousness, the only way it responds is through how we're being. So you don't pray for your prayers to be answered. You get up as if your prayers are already answered. That state of being is a level of energy that transforms every single atom in your life. The thought sends the signal out, and the feeling draws the event to you. So if you're living in a state of gratitude, what you're saying is, the event has already happened. And now, if I start thinking about when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen, I just return back to the old self. The new self would never think that way. So then, the marriage of subjective consciousness free-willed you and I, with that objective consciousness who endorses who we are, basically how we think and feel, is a loving intelligence and intelligent love. So then it has an electromagnetic frequency, and when you emulate it as a creator, in other words, you can't create from a guilty, lacking, selfish person. That's not the qualities of the divine. If you are going to create, you better emulate the divine. And what are the qualities of the divine? A loving intelligence and intelligent love. It's got a will that's so much greater than our will. It has a mind that's so much greater than our mind. It's got a love for life that's so much greater than our love for life. It is a consciousness. It's an awareness. It's observant of who we are. So then it has one rule. I honor free will, and I will endorse who you're being. So then when you and I connect to that intelligence by changing how we think and feel, what is the greatest ideal of ourselves? When you move into that elegant state of being and you're in the present moment and you're feeling empowered and divine and enriched and enthusiastic, and now it's time to create. When you create from that state of being, you're emulating the observer. And what you're saying is, observer, take a look at what I'm observing. I'm being like, I'm emulating you. Mm-hmm. So now you're looking down the telescope, I'm the lens of the telescope, and let's magnify that into our life. When that alignment takes place, then, and you feel connected to something greater, you would never try to force the outcome. The very thing we used our whole life to get what we want, for something greater to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, that's such a paradox. And the moment you step in, it honors free will. So then the person who's the new age person who's saying, well, I'm just going to wait for my Maserati to come to me. This is not how that works. Once you move into a new state of being and you're creating wealth, in other words, only gold creates gold. Lead doesn't create gold. And our job is to take those base emotions of anger and resentment and fear and anxiety, those base emotions, and transmute them into gold. Because right on the other side of our pain is freedom. Right on the other side of our lack is wealth or abundance. Right on the other side of our fear is courage. It's the same energy. It's just trapped in the body. And when we transmute that energy into something else, right? Mm-hmm. Now we have available energy to begin to design a destiny with. So then a person who moves into that elegant state of being where they're expanded and they're enriched and they're in love with life, then they can't go back to the old self, because that is their new state of being. So then if you practice that every day, sooner or later it's going to begin to become familiar to you. Process. So then if you're creating wealth,
yes,
and you're in the state of being of abundant, you better not be thinking lacking thoughts, because an abundant person would never do that. You can't demonstrate that you're not making choices because you believe that there's not enough, lack of time, lack of energy, lack of money. A wealthy person abundant person would never think of it. You can't feel unworthy and lacking if you're going to be a wealthy person. So by very logic and reason, you got to lay that down and move into this state of being. Now once you're in that state of being, you can't sit on the couch and wait for the phone call. Once you're in that state of being, you got to start making choices into the unknown from that state of being. You got to trust in the unknown. The moment you don't make the choice, you just doubted your creation. You return back to the known. And so people then, when you're in that state of being, the miraculous happens when you say, okay, I'm going to go for it. But you're not going to go for it as your limited emotional self. You're going to go for it as your unlimited self, and you begin to make those choices and you step out into the unknown. That's when the miraculous happens, and you say, oh my God, I'm so glad I made that choice. But then waking up in the morning then and priming your brain and body to make that change is the key.